Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ATAP live stream for today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kristen LeBlanc, and I am the Executive Director of ATAP. I'm very pleased to be here and very excited to welcome you to this event. I'd like to first thank our live stream sponsor, Armstrong Craven, for putting this together, this amazing content and rockstar panel. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Before we start, I just want to tell you a little bit more about ATAP. ATAP is the Association of Talent Acquisition Professionals, and we're the only membership association for all professionals in the field of talent acquisition. So we are a membership of about 700 leaders from all avenues of TA, from recruiters to sourcers, employment branding experts, social media specialists, etc. If you'd like to learn more about ATAP and join our association, you can find us at atapglobal.org. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sam Fletcher. He's the head of client services for Armstrong Craven, and he's going to introduce our content and panel today. Sam?
Thank you, Kristen. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. My name, is Sam Fletcher. I'm head of client services at Armstrong Craven. And just to quickly introduce you to our business, we're a leading talent insight, research and executive search firm. And we have offices in London, Manchester, New York, Geneva, Singapore, and Melbourne as well. So to provide you with a little bit of a background to the webinar, we've really seen talent intelligence growing for quite some time now, but we've seen a real genuine acceleration over the past year. And we've had many conversations with our clients around the uptake of talent intelligence and the really accelerated interest in this as a field. And we're seeing this as partially a result of the pandemic, where we've seen companies shifting more and more to remote hiring. And the challenge that they're facing now overwhelmingly when it comes to talent is really not knowing where to focus their sourcing and their talent acquisition teams, where they're focusing their hiring efforts and being able to compete in more of a remote space. And they're struggling as well with really genuinely having insight into talent outside of wherever they were previously hiring. So their main office locations, their technology hubs, their shared service centers. They knew these markets very well. They had talent pipelines. They understood compensation and benefits levels. But really, when they're now hiring remotely, a lot of that information really isn't as relevant, and they're suddenly exposed to more of a kind of a distributed geographic talent acquisition strategy. So I've been speaking with HR and talent acquisition leaders across sectors, and they are now all trying to answer the same big question, and that is, when you can hire anywhere, where do you start? And we've really seen this in some of the survey responses that we've received for this webinar. So you answered some questions when you initially signed up, and most people that are on the webinar said that talent intelligence in their understanding and within their organizations was being used to support talent acquisition and was being used to give some guidance and some strategy to talent sourcing teams. So understanding things like location of talent, compensation levels, the demographic of talent, and that includes diversity. So understanding that is really just one use of talent intelligence. And we're going to talk about that today, as well as some other applications of the field of talent intelligence. Before we go into a real kind of detail and deep dive into some of these areas, I'd like to start with a definition. Talent intelligence is a growing field, and we're seeing the term used in a number of different ways, different contexts. I think it's always good to start with a bit of a definition. So talent intelligence, we put up on the screen here. So we define it as the collection and analysis of external labor market data to drive and inform talent and business decisions. Now, that is really a differentiation to what most people within HR and talent would understand within the HR, people and workforce analytics field. And we've defined that really as the collection analysis of internal talent data to drive talent decisions. So when you take the external data of talent intelligence and you combine that with the internal talent-related data of HR, people and workforce analytics, what you get is a 360-degree view of talent, and it allows you to add even more insight and gain even more of an informed understanding of talent to make these business decisions. So looking at our webinar today, I'm delighted to be joined by, as Kirsten said, rockstar kind of speakers in the talent intelligence world. So that is Marlika Pauls, Lyndon Yanes, and Toby Culshaw, who are our guest speakers today. But just before we hear from them, I'd like to hand over to my colleague in Armstrong Craven, Elizabeth Birrell, who is our Director of Insight and Talent Analytics. Elizabeth, over to you.
Thanks so much, Sam. So following on from that then, it's just a word from me on who we are and what we are doing here sponsoring this stream. So at Armstrong Craven, we've been delivering talent intelligence, that 360 view of talent that Sam mentioned, for over 30 years, solving problems for really some of the world's biggest businesses. And over that time, we have just seen a sea change in the appetite for and also the understanding of true strategic talent intelligence. So we started out just trying to capture and share the insight we were gaining as part of other service lines. So as part of search or market mapping, we would share that with clients so they and their teams could benefit from and build on the data that we were uncovering. And then we would progress to offering insight as its own unique service line, for which the appetite is just growing exponentially. And we're now delighted to be working with and learning from clients who are fully fledged TI teams of their own, and even consulting with those clients to support them in developing their TI function and their TI teams. Now, as a third-party provider, we're in a slightly different space to the panelists we're going to hear from in a moment, but we are just really proud to be part of the heritage of TI. And the most exciting part of my job personally as a director of Insight and Talent Analytics here is that we are building TI from the ground up all the time. New tech, new methodologies, new service lines, all led by brand new requests from clients who demand that we think differently about what talent data is and what we can do with it. And so that's why we were so thrilled to sponsor this event and events like it. Now, we are going to discuss secondary data sources, the changing landscape of TI tech. I know that our panel have some recommendations on all of that on this call, and we're really lucky to have, as Sam said, some real TI luminaries with us to do just that. But the word that we always try to get in is TI is not all tech and tools. To accompany talent analytics, you've got to have insight, context, nuance. That's the so what and also the what next. So as TI tools get better and more sophisticated, practitioners will always need to hear from the talent in talent intelligence, the people. So we always just fly the flag for primary insight. That's data that's being gathered live from exactly the talent pool that we want to understand, attract, retain, data that's being gathered for the first time, capturing the market as it is today. And being able to do that confidentially so we can talk honestly with potential candidates about their aspirations, employers of choice, EVP, their experience in these markets can make the difference between winning and losing in the war for talent that we're seeing and hearing so much about in many of the sectors and roles that we're working in. Now, that war for talent that we're seeing and continue to see, particularly as the markets bounce back from a real low in 2020, has driven more and more big businesses to look at embedding TI to tackle urgent talent issues, skills, scarcity, location, growth. So many companies are just doing that now for the first time. However, today, we're really going to get a snapshot of what that journey looks like from one of the longer established and largest TI functions, I think, out there. And so to that end then, as the first of our panelists, I'm really thrilled to welcome Marlika Pauls, who's the Talent Intelligence Manager at Philips. And she has come to share with us the journey that they've been through as a team at Philips establishing their TI function. So Marlika, thanks so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much for a nice introduction, Elizabeth. And I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
Perfect.
So establishing a TI function, I was asked to talk a little bit about it, but actually Toby on this call is the one who together with Alan established it within Philips. But I'm happy to talk about a little bit about how it's been developed over time, obviously. And I think the first years we just had a few people and really we were really focused on establishing relationship with a variety of different departments. You need to make sure that people are known to what talent intelligence can potentially bring to them, especially when you are an in-house department. So I think the first part was really about establishing those relationships and which departments you want to focus on. I think it's very much depending on the direction of your organization. We started with departments as M&A, strategy, real estate, HR, just to name a few. And as soon as you have started working on projects, the ball will be rolling, believe me.
Yeah.
If you have shown a few things of what your talent intelligence department can do and the added value of what it will bring, the ball gets rolling quite fast. And the advancements, and I think Elizabeth, you spoke about it as well a little bit, in technology and all the tools that we currently have. There's more data transparency, there's more data where you can have access to, and it's more in the public domain than it has ever been before. And that's also the level of playing field that we have. And the competitive advantage of talent intelligence is therefore really moving from data access to data analytics, and to really make, and I think that's the most important, to make actionable intelligence. I can provide my stakeholders a big dump of data and tell, okay, here you go. But that doesn't tell them anything. What is the data telling you? What is it not telling you? How is it influenced? And that's really important. And then tying that with internal people analytics, the broader internal intelligence landscape, understanding of company strategy, that really creates business value and impact. So I think for us, it really started about putting ourselves on the map, choose a few departments where we were crucial for us within Philips, then establishing really the relationship, and throughout that course, also collaborating with other departments. So within Philips, we have internal and external analytics divided. So partner up with those, partner up with real estate intelligence, about our footprint analysis, partner up with competitor intelligence, and really showing a talent perspective on that competitor data. And that's really a little bit our road, of TI function, but we're definitely not there yet. We have quite a lot of challenges that we have and where we're working on and finding our feet with.
Super. So you've talked a bit about the journey from being quite a small function to a really sustained period of growth. Can you talk us through what perhaps the early critical roles were as you started to be in and build that team?
Yeah, I think for us in the beginning, everyone was doing a lot of things. I think at the time when I joined, Toby was there. We were with 5 people. Well, please, Toby, correct me if I'm wrong. I think when I joined, we were with 5 people. So I came a little bit later to the party than some of my colleagues. And I think by then we were like having kind of like double-headed. It was like account management, so really stakeholder management, building the relationships, leading the projects, but also doing all the research ourselves. So doing the research, doing the analysis, the storytelling, and the presenting. And I think how everything has been developed over time, there are different needs. You cannot wear like different hats on every time. So for us at that point where we were 2.5 years ago to where we are now is that we have 4 account managers, and they actually work as individual contributors. And these persons are really responsible for assigned accounts. So they can be assigned to, for example, a business or a function. Yeah. And they're responsible for, managing the stakeholders, managing the pipeline, having that relationship and be really a trusted advisor to the business for their field of expertise. And they lead the projects like from kickoff phase to feasibility throughout the whole process to project and delivery, but also check-ins afterwards. When we deliver a project, it doesn't necessarily end. If we work on a location study or a footprint analysis, those decisions are not made within 3 months. They usually take a lot of time. So it's also about checking in 6, 9, 12 months after we deliver the project on how is the project going, how did it land, what has been done with the work that we've done. And that provides for an account manager also a really great opportunity to check in with your stakeholder on how everything is going. And then besides that, we have a research management team. So we've really seen this year that we get so many requests, and it can sometimes be hard to manage everything that comes in, manage the workloads, but also the workload in between. You don't want to have some people be overloaded and working on 7 requests or doing a huge organizational design, and some people work on 1 request or doing a tiny thing. So we've created the role of research management, which I double have. And there's we really are responsible for utilization, making sure that you have a team, a team that bonds, learning and development, mentoring, and that's a team of resources and analysts. And then we have 2 data scientists who are responsible for, it's actually twofold. So it's the data science product offering, so we can work more efficient and more automated. And the other side is really working on projects, so scraping, for example, sentiment analysis, because don't ask me to write a code. I have no clue how to do it. Yeah, I can open R, I can type in some things, but if it's working, I don't know, So you see how big you get, how more specialities you need to have, because you cannot wear those different hats. And then we have a TI lead who is really focusing on the vision and mission, the strategy, establishing those long-term relationships. And that's a little bit the kind of roles that we have. But I think the type of roles you can have in an organization is very much depending on where you want to go to as a talent intelligence organization. How do you want to move? So you can have organizational psychologists who can work on leadership assessments for M&A, or cultural analysis. You can have data engineers. You can even have economists and statisticians. Sorry, I hate that word. But yeah, it's completely depending on the direction of your organization. I think in the end, it's the most important to have different of people with different skills in your team that can support and really empower each other.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super comprehensive. Thank you very much. I think it is interesting to hear about that balance, but also how, as the team grows and the appetite for TI grows, there is a need to manage workflow through the team. I think that some of the people who are dialing in today will be earlier in that journey, will be maybe just exploring establishing a TI function and making a case for it. And I think for all of us, there is a point early on where we feel we have to build a case to build appetite for TI. So we love to hear that. There is so much appetite from internal stakeholders at a business like Philips that you need to manage the flow through of requests and prioritize. I think that is where we want to see TI getting for those fledgling teams. So that's exciting to hear. Can you maybe give us an example then of another challenge you've faced during maybe your time at Philips and how that was overcome for our newer TI listeners?
Yeah, I think there are so many challenges. I'm learning something new every single day, to be very honest. I think you have the standard challenges, the data accuracy and the data availability. And I think I had requests that I thought, okay, yeah, I can do that. But while I was doing it, then I thought, oh my God, how on earth am I going to get this data? So a big learning for me was, as soon as I have a kickoff call and really understand the problem of a stakeholder, to always, and it doesn't matter what type of request I'm getting, to really do a feasibility study. I sometimes forgot to ask, certain questions. So I really created a standardized template with all questions that I want to ask to my stakeholder. So I make sure that I have the full picture. What's the problem statement? Why is it a problem? What's the business impact? But also think about the confidentiality level. Sometimes I forgot to ask that, and it's crucial. But also, what do I need from my stakeholder? What are the risks and interdependencies? And sometimes you need to fall. And I don't know, in the Netherlands, we have a say that you sometimes need to put your nose to a wall. I don't know if that's the saying in English, to learn things. And doing that feasibility study, that really helps me in managing my expectations to the stakeholder as well. So yes, I can do that. However, my confidence level for it is 60%. Or yes, I can do it, but if you want me to go that deep, it will take me an extra 2 weeks. And another big learning, but that's what you were just saying, Elizabeth, is we're growing so much. So we have growing pains. And I think the biggest growing pain that I experience at this moment is that we're functionally divided. And so I'm, for example, responsible for marketing, but in the strategy account, we can also get marketing requests. And I think it's so important that we then collaborate together and that we don't work in silos, but that we use each other's expertise and that we talk to each other, and that we're not reinventing the wheel, but that we really talk to each other and say, hey, I have project XYZ. And then I say, hey, I've been working on that location already. Let me share all the insights that we have. And with that whole research management team that we've now set up, we really have weekly meetings. So we have weekly meetings and we talk to each other about where we're working on. And this really helps in, just it sounds very simple, but just talking to each other about where we're working on and sharing information. And I think that's been the biggest learning. Everyone wants to do things their own way or how they used to, especially when you're a team of, I don't know, how much are we? 14, 15, 16 people?
Yeah.
Just use the data that we already have. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the biggest learnings for us.
That's really interesting. Thank you very much. I think that that's something that we quite often hear echoed at these events when we have these conversations, is that the discipline is growing. We are all doing new things, and we're sometimes doing new things for the first time in team. So we all have experts in our larger or smaller teams, but also it can be tempting to go and plow our own furrow, is the saying in English, and that communication is so important. So I wonder if you could share with us if there is. You mentioned that there's a vision for talent intelligence, that's held by your head of TI, the vision and the mission. I wonder if from the broader team, perhaps you have a sense of what maybe the guiding principle is behind TI and how it works for Philips. Is that something you could share with us?
So you mean our principles for talent intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely that.
Yeah, so that has become really important for us. So we have our vision and mission, and we've also created the team philosophy. So what is a team we find important, which is connected to our behaviors, and that's how we drive and that's how we work. However, there was one point where we got so many requests. And I already had like alarm bells ringing when someone said to me, "Hey, it would be so nice to have." And I was like, no, nice to have. So we've been really creating principles. So we have defined principles when we pick up a project or not. So for us, it's important that our project is aligned to our business transformations. So it has a direct influence on those business transformations, or our big bets, and it can be Phil's big bets or our HR big bets. And for those priority projects, we need to have a business involved and an HR leadership team member involved, so that everyone is aware of what's been doing and all the noses are in the same direction. And between that, we have segmentation. So if it's a transformation project, it's a gold segmentation for us. So it has priority. If it is a strategy, it's silver. And when it's a non-priority project, that we call a bronze segmentation. It's not that we don't pick up any projects, because even though they might not be a priority, they can be an important project, or they can be a very cool project for analysts or consultants as a learning of development to work at. That is one project that they're going to lead on their own, that they learn how to do the storytelling, how to do a project intake, how to do feasibility. So that whole learning and development curve, that's something that we try to have in our principles as well, if that makes a little bit sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a really exciting industry to work in. But for us, something we've observed is that as these functions become more mature and there is more appetite, these really are, they're principles-led organized groups and teams who share a common vision, and those are the groups that are growing. And so it is interesting, it's telling, I think, that you speak about the principles of the group with such clarity. It's obviously a big part of the way that not only that prioritization works, but perhaps that the team at large works. I love to hear that there is still time to work on projects, just because they would be really cool for an analyst or a consultant to work on. I wouldn't like to think that anyone was losing sight of that, because a lot of this work is cool. It is fun to do. It is really new. The tech is new. And I mean, I could talk about all these things all day. I can see there are questions going into the chat. We are going to try and give each of our panelists 10 minutes and then open the room to questions, if that is okay. So we are seeing them and collating them, and we will come back to all of our favorites of them, but please stick with us in the meantime while we try and make sure that each of our panelists get through their 10 minutes. Well, Malika, thank you so much. It falls to me then to introduce the second of our speakers for this stream, which is Lyndon Yanez, I believe. Thank you very much for joining us. Sam, do you want to do a quick intro? I think I've cut you off there.
No problem at all. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Marlika, as well. That's really interesting. I know there's some questions already queuing up, as Elizabeth has mentioned, that we'll be asking you about towards the end as well. But Lyndon, thank you very much for joining us as well. And to introduce Lyndon, Lyndon is the Talent Intelligence Manager at Verizon, who is going to be talking to us a little bit around taxonomies and skills and some of the really fascinating work that he's been involved with there. So before we really dive into the details, Lyndon, could you start off with giving us a bit of an overview in a TI context? What is a taxonomy and why do we need one?
Sure. So taxonomy is a logical ordering and grouping and usually hierarchy of roles and how they work together and function together. So it's really important to get that, because if you don't have a concept of a taxonomy, your ability to scale your work in talent intelligence is really only going to go to a particular level, or you're going to hit walls, right? You're not going to be able to generalize, you're not going to be able to add things together. So taxonomies give you the ability to take roles apart, generalize them, and take what would normally be used for a single requisition, a single opening, and scale it to other places. Because you can say, oh, this falls within, let's say you're looking for a job for a talent intelligence analyst, right? This falls within the job family of data analytics, right? So I can take this and I can generalize this to other places, but I'm adding in my own kind of flavor for recruitment purposes and needs. So that's a big reason why a taxonomy is really important. And in Verizon, we have been on a long journey in the past year, year and a half. We've built up our own internal taxonomy, and the talent intelligence team was uniquely positioned to help kind of really set that up. If you build a taxonomy based on only what your company is doing, your internal skills, you kind of end up where we were, which with the need to build a new taxonomy, right? Because we focused on what something was for us without considering the market. And that's an important thing to consider, right? So if you talk about talent intelligence and looking at that external focus, you really have to understand, like, oh, I'm going to call this job, I'm going to call this job a data ninja, right? And nobody calls it a data ninja. You will not find anybody. And if you're using that as a hard term, people might not apply, or they don't know, they will not find your job because they're not going to search for data ninja, right? So that's an important thing to understand. How do you build these taxonomies, these clusters and groupings of roles that have logical order so that you can, build things? Part of some of the reasons why we were here, where we were saying we needed to recognize, we needed to build our own taxonomy, think about your own organization and ask yourself if your organization has the data structure to cleanly analyze and scale a role. And when I say that, I'm going to use the example of a project manager, because everyone's got a project manager somewhere, someplace, right? Some of you might even be calling yourself a project manager in your job. Ask yourself, is there a job code, or is there something in your internal HRM systems that calls everybody who does a similar work to you, like you, a project manager? Or in your role, would there be somebody else that's also going to be a data analyst? Will there be someone who is a TA specialist, right? When you take a look at that and you consider that, do they have the same skills as you, or they have different skills? If they don't, then that might be a good place for you to start asking yourself, do we need to revamp our taxonomy? Do we need to put some safeguards in place to make sure that this data structures are clean and generalizable? Because you want to get to the point where you can do that analysis for that talent intelligence analyst, which is really a business analyst or data analyst. And you want to be able to say, I can use this here, here, and here. At Verizon, we're not as big as Philips. Marlik they've gone like skyward with their growth, which is fantastic. We're a really small team. So when we think about this work, I always consider the scale and reproducibility, right? Since we're so small, we have to be incredibly efficient, and we have to be able to scale what we're doing and do it over and over again at the same level of excellence. So that's where the taxonomy really comes in. From there, the next place and what we're doing now that we've kind of established this taxonomy, first off, it's incredibly exciting. Take a deep breath. We've landed. We're now in a place where we have built the keys to build integrated talent management such that TA, workforce planning, the internal HRBPs, everyone is considering what you call a data analyst, the same thing across the board. We are now in a really good place, and our team is now, on top of the stuff we do for normal talent market analysis, we're now moving into the space of skills. Because let's think about what a job is, right? A job, which I said, a taxonomy is a clustering of roles and jobs. A job itself is a clustering of skills, right? If you start thinking about, well, what does so-and-so do, right? What does this person do? They are in meetings all day. They pick up the phone, they answer emails, and they manage projects. What's that job? I don't know. That's like anybody. That's anybody in a corporate job. That's not specific enough for you to be able to say what the job is. But then if I say they are managing accounts, they're reaching out to new clients, they're managing CRMs, right? They're following leads. Then you start saying, okay, that sounds like an account manager, right? Those terms, those skills were distinct and unique that you were able to say, oh, okay. At first, it sounded like anything and everything, but later on, I could understand what it was that defined the role. So we're now in the place where we built the taxonomy. We had the concept of skills baked in. Now we're starting to really partner with all the different data sources and teams to kind of shape that up. Again, the big reason why we're doing this, and talent intelligence are like, you're TA, what are you doing here? We are positioned and to see the world change. That's my favorite thing about this job. We see the world change, whether you know it or not. We're seeing roles evolve and businesses evolve when we look at the changes in supply and demand, which is implicitly the changes in skills needed to do a job. You're seeing roles evolve, like, for example, marketing, technology. We might have gone to the place where we said that is not a taxonomy role. It doesn't belong in taxonomy. It's not a job yet, because we see it having and exhibiting the same behaviors that data science did several years ago. So that's fun things, like to say, like, we are seeing something so volatile, but we're going to see it start to smooth and baseline over time. So that's what we're doing with skills, and we're using it now to say, if we combined a skill here for data visualization, one here for business intelligence tools, and one here for data science, how much overlap will we see? Is there overlap or isn't there? And that helps us understand how we can hire for roles, because we can better set our job positions and job descriptions to actually have the best talent pool, and for us to work with other teams, like our assessment team, where they might say, like, well, we can assess for this on the back end, the soft skills, but up front, you might want to screen for this as a requirement. Or we get to play with things like, expanding the funnel. Or if you have a job that's a hybrid job, talent intelligence is kind of a hybrid job, right? Do I have more candidates with data science and analytic skills, or do I have more candidates with recruitment project management skills, right? How do I look at that? Because it's really hard to find them both in the same person, right? I think the panelists are all pretty unique in that we're all pretty awesome. High five, guys, because we kind of check that box, but there aren't that many. So do we get to play with that and say, well, our supply demand will be 30-1 if we focus on the project management, but it's 15-1 if we focus on the data. So those are some of the things that we're getting to play with on the skills side, and getting to work on understanding how skills are evolving and changing, partnering with L&D, partnering with a workforce planning team, and doing all kinds of partnering, where we're just kind of reaching out our hands and getting to shake hands with everyone across HR, and everyone getting to play with that. On top of, like, the normal TI stuff that is very much like what Marlique kind of talked about and what kind of Toby will talk about. That's like our bread and butter. That's our daily, and this is kind of like our, how are we evolving and changing on top of, what we've done traditionally. I I've been ranting for a while, so I think I'm good. You let me know if you have another question or another place you want to route me.
Fantastic, thank you, Lyndon. That's really interesting. We've had a few questions come through around that, and there's others that we'll probably get to at the end as well, depending on time and kind of how conversations go. But I think a lot of the questions that have come through have been around tech and tools and things like that, which I think leads quite nicely into our next speaker. So I'd love to introduce Toby Colshaw, and Toby currently leads talent intelligence for worldwide operations and consumer group for Amazon. So Toby, over to you.
Thank you. How do I follow on from Linda and Marlika there? Anyway, we'll give it a go. I've seen a few of the questions coming in around the tech people are using and how it all stacks together. I think for me, there's a couple of different angles. And I think the first one, and I'll try and cover everything off, but if I miss anything, ask away. I've got the questions open and the chat open, so ask anything in there as we go. I think the first thing for me is keep it simple. Use the tech, use the tools that you have already initially, particularly if you're starting from scratch, if you don't have a TI function, if you don't have specialist resource, use what you've got to hand. So depending on your role, that's going to be your ATS system, your CRM system, your HCM. So it's the systems that recruitment have already in place, systems that HR already have in place. There's a lot of data in there that is really, really rich, really, really valuable. And we're really terrible as an industry at telling anyone about it. We're really terrible as TA at telling the hiring managers and the business what the candidate pipeline funnel looks like and what the actual data is telling us. We're really good at presenting this really polished, finished product at the top. And we're really terrible at telling everyone how we got there and how difficult it was to get there, because we've instinctively come through traditionally from the agency side of things, where we want to look like this polished, perfect model the whole time. So we're not very good at actually articulating how difficult that journey has been. But it's that journey that sets the context. It's the journey that sets the context of the market, the candidate salary, the skill set, the competitiveness, etc. So start to break down those silos. Look at the data you've got. So whether that's, as I say, your ATS, looking at your channel optimization, whether that's using actual candidate information, talking to candidates, storing that data. Don't just leave it in the notes of the recruiter, but say, how do we actually aggregate this up? How do we get these recurrent messages? At the moment, we're in a hugely aggressive candidate market where we're seeing a drop-off generally of candidates applying to jobs. We're seeing candidates drop through the funnel much faster. We're seeing candidates that are having multiple offers at any given stage and just dropping through. None of that's going to get tracked. None of that's going to get picked up by the leadership team unless we tell them. Unless we're actually looking at the data we're seeing and reporting that back, they're not going to know. All they're going to see is recruitment teams that aren't filling jobs, aren't filling them as effectively, aren't filling them as fast, aren't getting candidate pipelining as strong. So it's going to, we need to go back with data, but don't be scared by that. There is no data in there that's utterly terrifying. Once you start broadening out, looking into your HR data as well, you can pull in whole wonderful worlds of stuff, as Lyndon knows way better than me. But I think if you've got resource, use that. Partner with your HR analytics teams, partner with your people analytics teams, workforce planning, talent forecasting planning. There is lots and lots of data within organizations already before you even start to broaden out. I think once you've got that, once you've got a handle on the low-hanging fruit, as it were, and you've kind of got the internal piece sorted, start to use the easy resources externally. So for recruiters, the easy resource might be LinkedIn Recruiter. You might not want to go to the platform like LTI, which is the Talent Insight specific platform. To start with LinkedIn Recruiter, see what data is telling you there. When you're doing your searches, look at what the numbers are saying. So don't just look at the results, look at the numbers. If you've got LinkedIn Recruiter, you're going to have premium insights on company pages. Go on your competitor company pages, see what the insights are telling you around their hiring plans. What are they hiring now? What are their growth plan or the growth over the last 6 to 12 months? There's lots of data available to you, and you don't have to be, I think the fear is for a lot of people is you have to be really, really technically savvy to do any of this stuff. You have to be hardcore data scientist or data analyst to do this stuff. Does it help? Absolutely. Can you do weird and wonderful stuff if you can do that stuff? Absolutely. Do you have to do that to be able to get this ball rolling? Absolutely not. You don't have to do that initially. There are people you can partner with that can help you with that. That partner piece is really important as well externally. You're going to have lots of vendors that you work with and supply you, whether it's the job board aggregators or whoever it is. They're going to have tons of information. They're going to have tons of information resources, vendors such as yourselves. There's lots of partner organizations that once you start opening up these conversations and talking more openly about the problems and challenges you're facing, there's lots of sources out there willing to help. Is it always going to be free? No. Often it will be with vendors that, particularly if you're looking at job boards, etc., they're going to look to support you so that you'll obviously essentially spend more money with them eventually. But there's a lot that can be done for free or close to. Once you've got all that in place, absolutely start using some of the other platforms. So some of them were mentioned already. So you've got Gartner, Eurostat, you've got LinkedIn Talent Insights, TextKernel, Horsefly. There's loads of different platforms out there, depending on what you're trying to do. And I think that's the key thing with TI. We're seeing so many versions of the truth and variations of what that means. The sort of product and platform you're going to want to choose is going to vary dramatically. If you're a team that's being driven through what I would consider sourcing intelligence, which quite a number of the teams are, you're probably going to have something like LTI, where the link, so that's LTI's LinkedIn Talent Insights, where the data you're seeing from that is going to be very consistent with the data you're seeing in LinkedIn Recruiter. And what I would describe that is the total accessible market. They often call it the TAM, the total addressable market. I don't think that's accurate. I think it's actually the total accessible market. It's the market that your recruiters are realistically going to access. Can the recruiters in the market go around the back end of GitHub and find candidates? Yes. Can they find who the authors are on a wiki page and track down who that individual is through whatever platform and track them down? Yeah, they can, but realistically, they're not going to do that. Particularly in corporate environments, you just don't have bandwidth, you don't have the capacity, and sometimes you don't have the capabilities. So I think LinkedIn and LTI, etc., those sorts of platforms are great for that totally accessible market. Who is the market that realistically these recruiters are going to go out to, tap on the shoulder and approach? The reason that that's powerful and important is it gives you a very different picture to the actual total number. Depending on the market penetration of LinkedIn and the geography, North America, for example, LinkedIn's got a great market penetration. It's going to see some good stable numbers. You start going out into the Far East, if you start going to LATAM, if you start going to Africa, if you start going to India, the numbers vary dramatically, and that will change the sort of platform you need, and that your user will change. So if you're making a workforce decision, your user may be a head of HR strategy or a head of ops strategy. They're going to need different data sets. They're going to need that holistic picture. Yes, they still might want to know the LinkedIn data. They might want to know what your channel optimization strategy is going to be, but they're going to want to know the overall market as well. So that's where you might start going into the broader, more aggregated data platforms, but also absolutely start tying in Bureau of Labour statistics or national bodies of statistics, etc., and really pulling all that together to get a much more holistic view. I think the key thing through all of it is be really, really cognizant around who your audience is. And somebody, I forget who, apologies, mentioned the so what earlier on. Really, really identify what their so what is. So if you're going and you're saying to head of strategy, this is what we've got for you. This is your amazing data set. They look at it and go, so what? You're using data from LinkedIn in a market where it's got 5% market penetration. I don't care. That means nothing to me. I don't trust any of that data. I don't trust the data quality. I don't trust the market penetration. I don't care. That means nothing to me. So you've got to be really, really clear about the so what for the individual you're talking to. And that will really help drive your overall strategy. I think the strategy piece around what you're trying to achieve with your data platform or platforms is really important. What are you trying to be as a function? Are you a sourcing intel function? So you're there to drive recruiter capability, drive conversion rates, drive that channel optimization. Are you there to be an internal consulting function like Malika? Are you there to partner and merge the two worlds' data? Depending on what you're trying to achieve will really, really mean that your platform and your overall architecture will change very dramatically. I can see a few questions coming in. Sam, did you want me just to answer things as I see them, or do you want to pick them up and throw them whatever you want at me or Linda or Malika?
Sure. So I think the first one there is it's quite critical. You mentioned storytelling a little bit there, and actually the validity of data. So I think that question is coming from Mariana is very, very key. So how important do you find that storytelling element when you're trying to get insight into the data that you're using and actually translate it for people that aren't particularly data oriented themselves?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm hesitating to answer because I had two very different answers, essentially, without sounding like a politician. I think data storytelling is really important. Being able to articulate the context and the story is really, really important. Being able to take people through the journey of the data and what it's telling you, and what Malik said earlier, what it's telling you, but more importantly, sometimes what it's not telling you. And that's something that I think is really important and probably sets TI aside slightly from your traditional HR analytics, people analytics, where you have within TI, it's much more contextual, I think, than a lot of the other data fields. The flip side of that, I'm in an environment now where the structure of a meeting means you don't do that. You don't have the ability to story tell and take people through the journey. You write long form text, write the paper, it's presented and everyone reads it, and then you discuss. So you have to story tell through your writing, not orally. And that changes things dramatically because suddenly you have to be very, very explicit in how you're presenting data and what you're presenting in a very, very different way. So I think is data storytelling important? Absolutely. Once again, it comes back to the customer base as to how that storytelling is done though.
Excellent. I think one more question we've probably got time to before we can go to the broader Q&A, and Toby, this one's come in specifically for you, so I'll ask that. So someone's mentioned that they are in a global sourcing center of excellence, and they're wanting to really develop that into a global talent intelligence capability for the next 2 or 3 years. And they've mentioned, how do you go about scaling that, and what are the steps to scale from sourcing into true talent intelligence?
Yeah, this one's kind of somewhat contentious, if I'm going to be honest. It divides the industry. For me, it's two different fields. Are the skill sets similar? Absolutely can be. Can you move from one to the other? Absolutely you can. But I think for me personally, as long as you're tied into sourcing or recruitment in terms of your KPIs and your outputs, it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard to make that step change difference to TI. Some of it's in terms of pace, some of it's in terms of output, and some of it's in terms of customer. And I think that the most telling piece is it's really hard for a customer to have somebody come in and offer strategic consulting advice with using labor market intel. You could be an SVP, for example, looking at your future location strategy or your work from home strategy or your digital strategy. It's very hard to see that person in the same light as you would someone from BCG or McKinsey, etc., when at the same time they're working on sourcing on a rec for somebody that might be 6 layers deep in your organization. Is it fair? Probably not, no. But mentally, that's a really hard thing for that SVP to compartmentalize. And equally, from an output perspective, it can be really difficult for the intel person if they're trying to do really high-level strategic intel, but then they're being, all their KPIs and operational metrics are drilled around how many roles you're impacting. So I think that the KPIs will drive behaviors. So really long answer, can it be done? Absolutely. Carve it out away from sourcing. Start it off the side of the desk, build the business case, build the hunger for intel, then carve it out as an entirely separate offering within. Run it as essentially as a loss leader. You're running it with totally different KPIs, totally different metrics. It's a cost to your cost center. It's an absolute cost and an overhead, but it's something that adds value. So you still run the sourcing function separately. You draw that to put food on the table, roof over the head, but then you use the TI piece to get those more senior strategic relationships.
Excellent, very good. I think that'll be very useful. There's a lot of people on the webinar that are just looking to get started, and I think they are sat in talent sourcing, kind of capabilities and talent acquisition, and they want to make that next step. So that's really interesting to see how you separate it out, how you split it, and how the business can kind of focus on talent intelligence as not being something that maybe immediately impacts the bottom line, but actually it's a cost, but then it's a value add, and you grow it from there. I think it's a really good opportunity to jump into some of our questions that are coming through. So we've had quite a lot coming through thick and fast in the chat, as well as some curated questions coming through from the initial sign up. So the main one that kind of came through, and with a lot of people being fairly new to the capability, is how do you make a case for talent intelligence if your company hasn't really made a start? So what is the case for those internal conversations? How do you kind of break ground on talent intelligence within a corporate entity? So I think Marlika, can I pitch that question to you first?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think there are a variety of different things to say actually about a specific topic. I think we're in a world that is continuously changing. There's so much going on. We have the aging population, you have economic, you have the pandemic, you have customers and candidates that know way more than they did years ago. And organizations are always in transformations, and all of these transformations, they require answers on certain business problems. And due to that huge amount of technology, we have more access to data than we ever had before. So it is possible for us within TI to advise the business on those business problems from a talent perspective. And I think this is the opportunity that we all have. If you have no department, or you're trying to set it up or anything like that, and taking one of those crucial business problems for your organization. And I know every organization has one, so it will probably not be difficult to find one. And then using data, using that external labor market data, and combining this with the human aspect, and that's extremely important. So we can use all the data in the world that what we want, but we need to understand what is the data actually telling us. So that human capital aspect, that's still so crucial, even though we have hundreds of technology available. And that will then have huge value for an organization. So I would start recommending doing like a kind of like a little pilot with one of those biggest organizational transformation or a huge business problem, define the scope, check the feasibility. And there's so many groups available, like there are so many webinars like this. You have the Talent Intelligence Collective. So just type your question in there, and I promise you, there are a lot of people that are happy to help you out or show you in the right direction or show which sources you can use. And subsequently, you can really show your organization what talent intelligence can do. And another option is to use an external research firm. That's in most cases a little bit more costly, but it provides organization an opportunity. Okay, this is what we can do, what a research firm can do, and then we can bring it in-house, but at least you've then shown the added value of what external labor market data can bring to your organization. And as soon as they see that, I promise you there will be lots of appetite.
Excellent.
Thank you
very
very
good.
much.
Lyndon, I'm interested, given that what you talked about was very much kind of partnering with HR in looking at taxonomies and skills. Have you found kind of buy-in and working collaboratively with HR earlier on in the evolution has allowed you to gain more business buy-in?
Yeah, it definitely has. I'm sorry, which is the question specifically? I heard you ask about partnering with HR, but I might have missed the question part.
Yeah, so it's making the case for talent intelligence, and I guess if you're partnered with HR, that's a natural starting point outside of TA immediately.
Yeah, absolutely, you could do that. I mean, if you're just starting off to build a use case, frankly, when we started off, our client was only talent acquisition, right? It was an IC role, only helping senior managers in TA, and there wasn't a whole lot of appetite. So, like everything Marlika says is true. But I would say just do it. Just get a vendor, ask for some work to get it done, and then feed it to people, right? Because our use case for building up the function was getting the internal demand, saying, hey, how many requests have we gotten for research over the year, the amount of data points that we've analyzed, and that application. And so I would also almost say, like, starting with TA is your easiest, best way to build, because that is the functional group that will understand the need for how to use this most immediately. About 50% of our work comes from outside of TA, and that's split between the direct business clients. So, like, let's the VP of finance, then the HRBP community, then the workforce planning, and then L&D. They all take up 50% of our workload. So TA is still our biggest client. I would definitely focus there. And then once you start getting that base, it's understanding how the other clients and work groups can use this, right? So workforce planning and direct business clients love the stuff that we can give, because they use that for their workforce planning and their strategic selection for hubs. L&D loves it because they can use the stuff that we do with skills to understand what skills they can build and create content for, and how they can get, your software developers to be super Saiyan software developers, right? How do you go from, Charlie Brown to, Superman, right? That's the stuff that we're able to give the L&D folks. HRBPs love it because there's places where we can talk about certain benchmarks that they love to use. Diversity is a nice benchmark, hot topic. You can get that from your TI platforms. Attrition, if you're knowing what you use to do, that's another benchmark that HRBPs also love to really use, and we provide insight on that. So, it's a lot of knowing what your clients want. And I think Toby even mentioned it, like the so what, like, what's the business use case? What's in it for me? What information do they want? Identifying what you have that can be used by other places really supports your scalability and how you partner and grow your function in TI.
So much.
Thank you. I think there's another question that came through, and I think this is a little bit off the back of you mentioned, Toby, starting out as a cost center. So when you become a mature TI function, how do you start to provide a return on investment, or measure or show the impact that talent intelligence is having on that longer timeline?
Yeah, great question. I've toyed with a few different models, if I'm going to be honest. So there's some where we looked at a pure recharge model. So we look to literally flip from a cost center to a profit center by recharging internally. That works in some ways. It really helps to limit the nice to have requests. But depending on what's going on with the organization, it can leave the business with a really bad taste in their mouth. If you're needing TI is handy in change situations. So if that change situation is you're making redundancies, or you're looking to shift to low-cost countries because you're needing to really cut down the cost on teams, having an internal recharge really doesn't land well. So it's a really difficult one to play. I think the most important thing I've done is instill a measurable business impact that has to be articulated by the customer before we take on work. So I think that really differentiates. When you're doing work and then trying to find the value, you can spend your life chasing a tail. You get nowhere. You're scrambling at whether you've impacted a hire over here, or a cost savings over here. I think get the business to articulate, or the customer to articulate why this work's going to be of value. What is the measurable business impact? What is the problem statement they're facing? And it doesn't have to be a cost saving. It could be a value creation. If you don't solve X, you're not going to be able to achieve Y. And I think to Malika's point earlier, the more you can tie in with functions like marketing intelligence, like the strategy functions, they are much better articulating that, because they're used to articulating that. They're used to knowing what the numbers are. So I think understand the measurable business impact. You can still have metrics around cost savings. You can still have metrics around cost avoidance. But I think for me, that measurable business impact is really one of the key ones.
Thanks very much. That actually, it interestingly flips around another great question that has cropped up in the chat. It's almost another way of looking at this question, but I'm going to call it out because we do get asked time and time again. So Tracy Wharton in the chat tells us, I've been working in TI for a while. One of the biggest challenges for the teams I've worked with has been collecting project feedback from requesters and stakeholders. So does anyone on the panel have advice on establishing a process for collecting that feedback and data to help understand the impact of TI? So that is that, just exactly that secondary approach, Toby, that you were describing, where first we act and then we work to measure business impact.
Yeah, I might be able to throw in a couple of ideas there. So for us, we have a survey that we would push out, and like if our intake form records your email address, the submitter's email address, and so we were doing a point in time we were doing at surveys, and we said, okay, tell us how this was used and everything like that. That's one way to easily do it. We didn't get the best response rate from that. One of the easier things was honestly having a discussion, because when you give a form, people get kind of weirded out. They're like, this is work. But what we've actually done with our volume and our brand is we measure new clients versus repeat clients. And we have a lot of repeat clients come back to us. And usually when they come back, they're like saying, oh, we need another analysis. Like, oh, great, good to hear back from you. It's like, how'd the last one come out? What happened from the last one? Or, what's going on with this? Like, honestly, that has been better for feedback than any formal mechanism that we have put into place. That just honestly was and just jotting down the notes in our project tracker was a really easy way to get feedback from how things are being used. We also have clients who we really work closely with, and we'll prototype and we'll ask and we'll experiment with them. It's like, hey, favorite client, I'm trying something incredibly new and never before touched. You want to try it? And sometimes they'll say yes, and other times, they'll say, well, not for this one, but I'll want you to try it here. So building that client partnership is kind of really key. Also, the big thing that Toby said is saying, we have on our intake also formal use case, right? Why are you doing this? Because if you're like Marlique and you're getting overloaded with requests, and someone says, I'm doing this because I can't find the talent and I can't find a customer service rep, then you kind of just say, well, okay, I'm going to de-escalate that because I've got a VP request to actually get something done. So why they want to do it should be in your intake. So then you can articulate that when you're kind of doing things, even if they're not giving you feedback.
That's really clear and really smart. Thank you very much. Well, I think that we have gone to time, I'm afraid. I think that we have managed to hit all of the questions in the Q&A as well. So that's fantastic. Lyndon, Marlika and Toby, thank you so much for agreeing to join us on this stream. And thank you as well to our friends at ATAP. I'm going to hand over to Kristen, I believe, just to close us down.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a fabulous day. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you soon. If you want to see more webinars and live streams, we're at atapglobal.org. And thank you again to Armstrong Craven for this fun and energetic panel.
Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for joining. Really good to see
you.
you.
Everyone.
Thank you all.
Good day.
Bye-bye.